Peter Jackson made a lot of changes to The Lord of the Rings. And if you've seen the deleted footage of Aragorn dueling Sauron, you know that he nearly changed a lot more than what we got. The way that the Dead Men of Dunharrow are presented in the movie trilogy is one of these cases, with one caveat. It is actually so similar on the surface that if you haven't read the books in a while, the visual misrepresentation of the movies may have altered your perception of Tolkien's writings and intentions. And so, what is the difference between Peter Jackson's version and Tolkien's version? And most importantly, why was this decision made to begin with? But before that, let us gain a basic understanding of who these men were, and why they're in the state that we find them in during the War of the Ring. The Men of the Mountains, or those that would eventually come to be known as the Oathbreakers or the Dead Men of Dunharrow, were originally a people that inhabited the White Mountains before the major settlement of the area by the Númenóreans of the Second Age. Throughout their known history, similarly to most among the non-Númenórean tribes of men, they had worshipped Sauron as their god-king. With the establishment of Gondor, however, following the fall of Númenor, the king of these mountains swore a sacred oath of allegiance to Isildur. To mark the importance of this oath, it was made up on the stone of Erech, an ancient Númenórean artifact in the shape of a massive black globe. However, when the great war between the Free Peoples and the Dark Lord finally came, the Men of the Mountains and their king did not answer the call of Isildur. They broke their oath, and for this they were cursed by Isildur himself, essentially that they would never find rest for what they had done. Here we see some of the mystery of how Middle-earth operates. Whether Isildur's words had any tangible effect is not known, but what can be said for certain is that it is innately unnatural to break them, meaning it may very well go against the divine order of the world. We see a sentiment like this in the description of the Oath of Feanor. They swore an oath which none shall break, and none should take, by the name even of Ilúvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not, and Manwë they named in witness, and Varda, and the hallowed mountain of Taniquetil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world, Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, or any creature great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession. Thus spoke Medros and Maglor and Celegorm, Curufin and Caranthir, Amrod and Amras, princes of the Noldor, and many quailed to hear the dread words. For so sworn, good or evil, an oath may not be broken, and it shall pursue Oathkeeper and Oathbreaker to the world's end. So it was for Feanor's sons, and so it was for the Men of the Mountains. Through which rational process they took the forms of wraiths and haunted the mountains we cannot say, but we know that the oath is at the core. Regardless, for the next age of the world, these doomed men roamed their mountains, unable to find rest, and the area that they used to call home became synonymous with terror. I will not focus on the specifics scene by scene of what's different between the interaction of the dead and our protagonists, because the end result is this. Aragorn is recognized as Isildur's heir, and he promises to hold their oath fulfilled if they help in the fight against evil. The dead agree, and we are led to the first real deviation from the books. You see, the Oathbreakers were never anywhere near Minas Tirith or the Battle of Pelennor Fields, as shown in the movies. Instead, they are taken to Pelargir, in the very south of Gondor, where Aragorn decides to deem their oath fulfilled after they scatter the Corsairs of Umbar, who were a massive threat to the integrity of Gondor. Therefore, this massive horde of the dead coming in and sweeping the forces of evil from Minas Tirith and essentially saving the day Hollywood style, never happened. In fact, this misrepresentation has given rise to the question of why Aragorn didn't just keep them for a little while longer for the fight at the Black Gate. They are presented as this unbeatable force at the will of our good guys, all the while the full stakes of the Battle of the Black Gate are becoming all the more clear. In this, the primary explanation is usually Aragorn's honor and integrity, and it's left at that. While Aragorn's honor certainly plays a key part in this within the books, it's nowhere near this simplistic. You see, the dead men did not actually fight anyone, or at least this is the most widespread interpretation of the original text. They were wraiths that could not have a tangible impact on the physical world during the battle with the Corsairs. The only thing they did, which admittedly was very successful and the whole point of the encounter, was absolutely terrify the Corsairs with their presence. This caused them to flee, which allowed the defenders to push back and cut down whoever was left. In fact, Gimli the dwarf has this to say: "Pale swords were drawn, but I know not whether their blades would still bite, for the dead needed no longer any weapon but fear." And equally important was the matter of the Corsair ships. The Gondorians seized them, but only after the dead were gone, and then used the taken ships to sail the Gondorian reinforcements to Minas Tirith. As you can understand, it would not have been easy to keep both the living and the dead together, and one was significantly more important than the other. Not to mention, more trustworthy too, as the men of the mountains were still the Oathbreakers that had betrayed Isildur. Therefore, with this victory, Aragorn released them honorably and continued his campaign. All in all, we have a very well thought out situation, with coherent and consistent stakes as well as logical implications. The evil Oathbreakers take the chance to free themselves. They help in the war, but only to the logical extent that they can, and are then released by Aragorn through a combination of honor and common sense. Contrast this to the all-powerful undead army saving Minas Tirith, ruining Mordor's day entirely, and then being sent away before the battle that will actually decide the fate of the world. In my opinion, the movie version is not only less impactful, because it takes away from our protagonists and human defenders, but it is also a rather cheap way to include the Oathbreakers. And that's not to mention the logical leaps we have to go over as a result of the power level that they are shown to have. In the end, I think the primary reason why Peter Jackson made this change is practicality. In an already massive movie, he would have required the extra effort to delve deeper into the threat that were the Corsairs, as well as the battles that were taking place away from Minas Tirith. To solve this, he sort of merged everything together and added a feel-good moment of the dead fighting Mordor before being released. Definitely subjective as to whether you enjoyed the change, but ultimately not how Tolkien himself envisioned the role of these creatures. Not a particularly big deal for me personally, but I thought it was important to make sure what Tolkien actually wrote and intended is what exists in the popular imagination, as opposed to the adaptation of it. But what do you think of all of this? A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.